prospect says, hey, we'll get back to you if we're interested. What do you do then? What do you say? What do you ask? Or do you just quiver up and just hope and pray they do? See, this is a common objection you can get in two stages of the sales process. You can get this very early in the sales conversation, or you can actually get it at the end of the sales conversation and or sales process, depending on if you sell B2C, B2B. Now, first of all, we need to make sure that we do not come across as a desperate salesperson and just agree to let them get back to us or say something like, can I call you later today? And then you just randomly call them later, and as you know, they never answer. If they said that, like if you called and said, hey, you responded to XYZ ad, oh, hey, yeah, I'll have to call you back later if I'm interested. Or can you call me back later if I'm interested? So you never just lower your status and agree to call them back, okay? Why do you not want to do that? Because when you do that, it lowers your status with a prospect as they start to view you as what? Just another salesperson trying to sell them something. So they try to avoid you, all right? So let's go over how to address this. If they give you this objection early in the conversation, let's say in the first 30 seconds to a minute, and then I'm also going to show you how to address it if they bring it up at the end of your sales process. Like if they say, hey, this looks really good, let me go through it and we'll get back to you if we're interested, because there's going to be some tweaks there. Now in this example, let's say you called an outbound lead. And in our mind, an outbound lead is someone who's either responded to an ad online, maybe even a newspaper, direct mail, doesn't matter, left a phone number for your company to call back, and they say this objection, they give this objection to you within the first 30 seconds, okay? I'm gonna show you. The prospect says, hey, yeah, thanks for your call, James, but I don't have time to talk. Can I just get back to you later if I'm interested? Now, here's how you're gonna separate yourself from every other salesperson, what they would normally do. You're gonna say this, well, possibly, I'd have to look at my schedule to see if I'd be available for you. Now, what I can do though, if you have your calendar handy, I can pull up mine. That way you can book a specific time with me so you don't have to chase me down and vice versa. Would that help you? Now, then you're going to book a specific time later that day or the next day. If you book a time a week away, the likelihood of that prospect ever remembering that and showing up is going to be very, very low, as you know. Now, why would I just not agree to let them randomly call back when they said, well, I'm busy right now, can I just call you back later? Or can you call me back later? Because more than likely, as you know, they're not going to call back. See, that's a fight or flight response that they gave you when you called them. So at that point, they're just trying to get rid of you. Realize when we come into any sales call or any sales conversation, no matter what you sell, B2C, B2B, door to door, it doesn't matter, we have to first establish what's called a status frame. Meaning that when we enter that call, we must get the prospect to at least view us at the same level as them as far as our status in the beginning of that call, or at least at the same level. Now, by the middle to the end of that conversation, we must get them to view us as having a much higher status in that subject we are communicating with them about. That triggers them to view us as the expert or the trusted authority that can get them the results they're looking for, rather than viewing you as just another salesperson who's trying to sell them something because of a lower status. So when they say they'll just get back to us later at the beginning of a call, or even if they say, hey, can you call me back later? The way we establish the right status frame is by simply acting detached from the outcome. So I want you to analyze this. Just hold with me for a second. When we say, well, possibly, I'd have to look at my calendar to see if I'd even be available for you. When we say that, it starts to trigger in their mind that, hold on, this person's busy. They don't need me. We've got tons of clients. So it triggers in their brain, well, possibly. I'd have to look at my schedule to see if I'd even be available for you. And that positions your status as somebody that actually knows what they're talking about. You have lots of clients. You don't need them. You don't have to chase them. So it raises your status in that prospect's mind. Therefore, you might have something that could be important to them. So especially when we say this, what I can do, if you'd like, what I can do if it helps you, is if you have your calendar handy, I can pull up mine. That way you can book a specific time so you don't have to chase me down and vice versa. Would that be appropriate, or would that help you? Now, once again, that establishes a status frame where they start to view you at a much higher status. All of a sudden, you're suggesting they can book a specific time. That way they don't have to chase you down. Do you see the difference in there? It gets them to think you must be a successful person if others are having to chase you down just to get on a call about what you offer. So you must have something important that could be important to them. Now, if the prospect does, here I want to throw this disclaimer out. If the prospect does not call you at the time they booked with you, then what do? You simply call them about 2 to 3 minutes later. What you don't want to do is right at 3 o'clock when they're supposed to call you, at 3:03, you pick up the phone and start dialing, because that just shows that you're just sitting there all day waiting to call the prospect. That's desperate. Now, you don't want to call 10 or 20 minutes later, but typically 2 or 3 minutes later. You never want to call right on the dot, because like I said, shows that you're desperate. You're waiting around to call them. Now let's say you get this objection like, hey, we'll take a look at it and we'll get back to you if we're interested. And you get that at the end of a sales call or a conversation. Now, if you sold B2C and you did a one-call close, it'd be different than if you sold, let's say, B2B and you're trying to set up, let's say, a second call for a demo or a proposal or whatever your next step is in your sales cycle and process. Now, let's say in this example that you sold B2C, okay? And I'm going to show you a B2B example in just a minute. There's a little bit of a difference. Prospect says, we really like this, what you offered, but, give us some time and we'll get back to you, if we're interested. Here's what you're going to say. First of all, remember, you have to disarm them. You have to get them to let their guard down so they can really tell you what the real concern is, because them saying they'll get back to you if we're interested, that's not really a concern. That's like waffling, right? So you got to get them very specific what's holding them back from moving forward. So you say, yeah, that's not a problem. So you say, yeah, that's not a problem. Now, what's your time frame on getting back to me later today or tomorrow to see if I'd be available for you? So once again, you're going to do the same thing as we did before. That's why I didn't write it on the board. You're going to say, yeah, that's not a problem. Now, what's your time frame on getting back to me later today or tomorrow just to see if I'd be available for you? Remember, it positions you as busy. You don't need their business. You got lots of other clients. You're detached. Raises your status. Prospects, well, we're not sure. We just need some time to really think it over. Aha, now you're starting to get closer to what the actual objection is. But you're not quite there, because I want to think it over is not a real objection either, is it? You then say this. This is the calendar commitment that I taught you earlier, where you raise your status by getting them to book a specific time. Well, what I can do, Joan, if it helps you, is if you have your calendar handy, I can pull up mine and have you book a specific time with me. That way you don't have to chase me down and vice versa, because my schedule gets pretty hectic. Would that help you? Okay, now at this point, we still don't know what the real concern is, but at least we have a book time and the prospect is disarmed and letting their guard down because they feel or think you're about to go. You might be on a Zoom call, you're about to leave Zoom. You might be in the boardroom, you're about to leave their office. You might be in a home, you're leaving the home. You might be on a call, they feel like you're leaving the call because you booked a specific time with them for another day. Do you see how we're disarming them? But we still don't know what their real concern is. So when a prospect says, give us some time and we'll get back to you with an answer, or we'll get back to you if we're interested, or we need some time to think about it, that is not a real objection. The objection is behind that response that they just gave you. It's behind that. It's like hiding out and they don't want to let it out. If you don't find out what the real objection is, well, guess what? The likelihood of them getting back to you is slim to none, right? So you would treat this exactly like you would treat I want to think it over objection, which we have that in our virtual training courses. We don't have time to go through that today. So after they have booked a specific time with you for the next call, you simply ask this question to get them to reveal the real concern. And once again, they think you're leaving at this point, so they're more open to tell you. Watch what we do here. Now, John, before I go, see what I just did? Now, before I go, what were you wanting to go over in your mind, just so I know what questions you might have when we talk in 2 days? See, let me repeat that. Now, before I go, so they think you're going, right? So, hey, they can tell you the truth because you're about to go, right? They're opening up. Now, John, before I go, what were you wanting to go over in your mind, just so I know what questions you might have when we talk tomorrow? Now, this is the key. See, that's a much better way than saying, what do you want to think about, John? They're not going to tell you. But before I go, what were you wanting to go over in your mind, just so I know what questions you might have when we talk again tomorrow? Now, this is the key, because at this point, they're going to tell you what the real concern is. They might say, well, I'm just concerned about X, Y, and Z, or I'm just not understanding this part of what you're offering, or I'm just not quite sure we have the budget or the money for this. Now you know what the concern is. The concern is not, I'll think about it and get back to you at an answer. The concern about is something like a money objection, or they feel like they don't have the time to implement it. It just depends on what you sell. Now, would you rather know what their real concern is now, when you're on Zoom with them, or in person, or on the phone, rather than not knowing and hoping and praying they're going to show up to the next appointment? Now, at this point, once you know what the real concern is, you're obviously there with them, you can stay there, clarify that concern, ask what's called a diffusing question, and then discuss it like two people who are trying to work out a solution together, and most of the time close that deal on that call, or at least move them forward to the next stage of the process if you sold B2B example, okay? Now in this example, let's say that you sell B2B, business to business, and you're trying to set up a second call to do a demo of your product or service, whatever you sell, and you get well, that's not necessary. Let me just take what you've said today and talk with everybody, and we'll get back to you if we're interested. Okay, so let me give you an example. I'm going to start in role play. You say this, okay, John, good first call that really gives us a better understanding of kind of what's going on with your company situation. Really the next step would be, if it's appropriate, is we would schedule a demo with your team in the XYZ department to go over how the XYZ product would actually solve the problems that you brought up and kind of get you guys where you're wanting to go. Would that help you? Let's say you say that, okay? You say that and the prospect says, well, I don't know, I'm not quite sure we'd have time right now. We're really busy with everything going on. Why don't we just get back to you later? Then you say this. What do you say when they say that? You just say, yeah, that's not a problem. You just agree with it. Remember, we have to disarm the prospect. If we can't disarm the prospect, if we can't get them to lower their guard, there's no way we're going to move that sale forward. So we have to remove the sales pressure. We agree, yeah, that's not a problem. And then you're going to lean in and say this. Now, you're going to lean in if you're in person. So if you're in the home, or if you're selling B2B, you're probably going to be in their office or some type of boardroom, or you might be on Zoom if you're doing it virtually, and you're going to lean in, or if you're on the phone, you're still going to lean in, because your body language affects what? Your tonality and how it comes across. And you say this. Now, before I go, okay, so remember, you're disarming them. They think you're going. Now, before I go, just between me and you and off the record. Now, I'm not doing the right tonality here. I'm just going to show you. Now, before I go, just between me and you and off the record, what's really holding you back from exploring this further so that you can? And then you're going to repeat back what they said they wanted. Now, let me show you the right tonality, okay? I want to show you how this works. Now, John, before I go, and just, between me and you and off the record, what's really holding you back from exploring this further so that you guys can? And you're going to repeat back what they said they wanted, all right? Now look, before I go, between me and you, remember, selling is collaborative. Between me and you, we're on the same team. And off the record, always say that. Now, you can't say that 3 times during a sales call. You can only use that once, because then they're going to start feeling like it's a technique. Well, off the record, what's really holding you back? You lean in and whisper that. See my tonality, okay? Between me and you and off the record. And you do this, off the record, what's really holding you back from exploring this further so that you can, and then you're going to repeat back what they said they wanted. Now, let's say the prospect says this, well, we're not sure about, and then they tell you the real concern. Do you see how that works? Now let's do that over again. Then the prospect says, well, we're not sure about, and here is where they tell you what the real concern actually is. Now, depending on what their concern is, depends on how you address it to it at this point. You then, once again, clarify it, discuss it like two people working together to find a solution, and then you diffuse it, then book them for the second call demo, second call proposal, whatever your second step is in your sales process. So that's what you do at the end if they say, oh, let's take a look, we'll get back to you if we're interested. Do that on your next sales call or appointment and watch how your prospects easily overcome that concern and move on to the next step in your sales process. And that is your tip for the day.